Kaspar Hauser staggers into the snow with a fresh stab wound, clutching a note that seems to explain everything, and somehow explains nothing. If he's telling the truth, someone tried to erase him. If he's lying, he just staged the perfect ending. By the end, you'll understand the tight timeline of Kaspar's last days, what the note and wound do and do not prove, and why his 1833 stabbing still splits historians between assassination and self-inflicted mythmaking. A teenager who claimed he was raised in isolation becomes a political lightning rod, and his death turns into evidence in a fight over power, legitimacy, and who gets to control a human life story. Was Kaspar Hauser stabbed by an unseen handler to silence a dangerous secret, or did Kaspar create the attack himself to keep the world from abandoning him? He is running through the winter garden. Snow has not fallen, but the air bites like it has. A young man clutches his side. His breath comes in harsh, thin bursts. Behind him, the town of Ansbach goes on as if nothing has happened. He reaches the gate. He stumbles. He calls out, and when someone finally grabs him, they feel the wet warmth spreading under his coat. A stab wound. Fresh. Deep. He is carried inside. His face is pale, but his eyes are wide open. He tries to speak, and the name he gives, the story he offers, turns the room cold. Because the wounded young man is Kaspar Hauser, the foundling. The one some people still whisper is a prince. He whispers that a stranger lured him to the garden. He says there was a bag, a message, a blade. He says he was attacked, on purpose. And before the night is over, the question in the town is not just who stabbed him, it is why. If Kaspar Hauser dies, what dies with him? And if he lives, what truth will he reveal that someone wanted buried? So who was waiting for him in that garden? To understand the wound, we have to understand the boy, or the young man now. But even that is part of the problem. Kaspar Hauser arrives in public like a story that has lost its first pages. He appears years earlier in a city square in Nuremberg. He is not quite child and not quite adult. He can barely walk. His words are few. He carries a letter. He says he wants to be a cavalryman. He repeats phrases like, he learned them without meaning. People stare. Officials question him. Teachers test him. Doctors examine him. And from the start, everyone sees what they want. A victim. A fraud. A miracle. A weapon. Kaspar's own explanation is strange and simple. He says he grew up in a small dark room. He says he never saw the sun. He says a man brought him bread and water. He says he was taught a few words, then pushed into the world like a package. In a Europe obsessed with birthright and revolution, that story is gasoline. Because if it is true, someone hid him, and if someone hid him, someone had reason. So who benefits from a boy with no past? Nuremberg becomes his stage and his laboratory. He is placed under care. He is watched. He is measured. Every habit becomes evidence. He eats with odd caution. He sleeps like someone waiting to be shaken awake. He startles at sudden sound. He reacts strongly to certain smells. People write it down. They argue about it. Is it proof of imprisonment or proof of imagination? Kaspar learns quickly. That alone shocks his observers. He learns language. He learns manners. He learns how to tell a story, so people lean closer. And that is where sympathy turns into suspicion. because a fast learner can also be a performer. Soon, the case is no longer only about what happened to him. It is about what he can be made to mean, a symbol of cruelty, a symbol of deception, a symbol of politics. And when a person becomes a symbol, they stop being safe. So when Kaspar says he was stabbed in a garden in 1833, we have to ask, was this the end of a life being hunted, or the climax of a life being staged? If Kaspar is both victim and narrator, which part do we trust? The wound is real, but the message he carried is a performance. Who writes a confession that can't be tested? And why would Kaspar make it impossible to verify? Stop picturing a masked stranger. Now picture Kaspar alone, rehearsing what he'll say after the blade goes in, and ask yourself, who taught him that script? By 1833, Kaspar is no longer a curiosity in a square. He is a young man with opinions. He has protectors. He has critics. He has critics. He has people who call him family. And he has people who think he is dangerous. He lives in Ansbach now, under the care of officials. There is structure around him. Rules. Schedule. Supervision. But there is also loneliness. Kaspar has always been surrounded by eyes, not by closeness. The attention that once felt like rescue begins to feel like pressure. He wants independence. He wants dignity. He also wants to be believed, and belief is always slipping away. Rumors follow him into rooms, that he lies, that he exaggerates, that he is ungrateful, that he is being used. Kaspar senses the shift. He becomes moody. He becomes defensive. He becomes, at times, hard to manage. And in that tension, something important happens. A story that began as a mystery becomes an argument. And arguments create sides. In a town like Ansbach, sides create enemies. So in 1833, when Kaspar walks into that garden, who does he think is waiting for him? Quick recap. Here's what we know so far, and the one detail that still doesn't fit. Kaspar didn't just collapse. He arrived with a story preloaded. If someone attacked him, how did they also manage to control the narrative in his pocket? The day of the stabbing does not begin like a legend. It begins like a day. Kaspar goes out. He is seen. He moves through familiar places. Then, at some point, he heads toward the court garden. It is a controlled space, but not a sealed one. Paths, hedges, corners. It is easy to imagine privacy there. Easy to imagine a meeting. Kaspar later says a man approached him. A stranger. A promise. A message. The stranger, he says, told him to come to a certain spot. Kaspar goes. And in that spot, the attack happens. A quick thrust. A sudden pain. Then flight. Kaspar runs for help. He makes it out. He collapses into human hands. He is carried to safety. He speaks. He insists. Someone did this. Someone did this. If he is telling the truth, then someone knew his habits. Someone knew where he could be alone. Someone chose a public garden because it looks harmless. So why choose a place where the victim might escape? The timeline is tighter than most retellings admit. In the hours around the stabbing, who had the access and who had the motive to stage a perfect mystery? In the hours after the attack, the details harden into evidence. There is blood. There is a wound. There are witnesses who saw him staggering. And there is a note. Or at least, there is said to be a note. A message associated with the meeting. The story of the note becomes as important as the knife. Because a note can be traced. A note can be analyzed. A note can point outward or inward. People examine handwriting. They examine phrasing. They examine whether it looks like Kaspar's, and even if it does not, people argue about what that means. Maybe the attacker disguised his hand. Maybe Kaspar disguised his. In a case like this, proof is a mirror. It reflects whatever the viewer already believes. Meanwhile, Kaspar lies in pain. Doctors treat him. Caretakers watch his breathing. Officials start asking their questions. They ask about the stranger. They ask about the path. They ask why Kaspar went alone. And Kaspar answers, but he answers as someone who has learned how fragile belief can be. So how much does he reveal, and how much does he shape? People say the note proves an assassin, but the note's odd details point in another direction. What if the biggest clue is not what it says, but what it avoids saying? For a moment, ignore the politics and listen to the injury like a forensic witness, because one detail about the wound refuses to cooperate. The investigation begins, but it begins inside a store. Because Kaspar Hauser is not just a victim, he is a public case. A magnet. Every theory has been waiting for an event like this. Those who believe he is of noble birth hear the stabbing as confirmation, an assassin sent to finish what the tower began. Those who believe he is a fraud hear something else. A self-inflicted wound, meant to revive fading attention. And there are quieter voices too. People who think he is neither prince nor con artist, just a damaged person, acting in damaged ways. The town's officials have practical concerns. If there is a murderer, the town looks unsafe. If the famous foundling faked it, the town looks foolish. Either way, the authorities are under pressure, so they search the garden. They question servants. They map the path. They inspect hedges and footprints. And they try to fix time. When did Kaspar enter? When did he leave? Who saw him? Who did not? But gardens do not keep records, and winter light fades early, so in the gaps, the story grows teeth. Which is more dangerous here? A killer hiding in the shrubbery, or a community desperate to settle the argument? Kaspar had already survived earlier threats that looked like warnings. Were those attempts to kill him, or rehearsals for a story he knew he'd need later? Kaspar's wound becomes the center of the room. How deep is it? Where exactly is it? Could he have done it to himself? Would someone do it that way? People lean on medical opinion like it is a verdict. But bodies are not courtroom diagrams. Pain makes people inconsistent. Shock makes memory stutter. And even honest witnesses disagree. Some say he seemed confused. Some say he was clear. Some say he was clear. Some say he spoke of the stranger with certainty. Some say his description was vague. Kaspar, for his part, holds to the idea of an attacker. He describes a man, a face, a cloak, a manner. Yet descriptions of strangers are easy to offer, because strangers have no names, no alibis, no family to defend them. A stranger is a perfect villain, and in a case already thick with rumor, a stranger is also a perfect invention. So the question sharpens. Does the wound prove Kaspar was hunted? Or does it prove he knew exactly how to keep the world watching? Quick recap. Here's what we know so far, and the one detail that still doesn't fit. As Kaspar weakens, the urgency rises. If he dies, there will be no further questioning, no cross-examination, no second chance. The story will freeze, and the frozen version will be the one that lasts. So people hurry to interpret. Caretakers report his words, officials record statements, visitors whisper at doors. Kaspar speaks of the meeting again. He speaks of the note again. he speaks of the stranger again. He knows he is being listened to in a special way. Every syllable might become history. That kind of attention can sanctify. It can also tempt. And Kaspar has lived for years inside a glass box built by other people. Now, as he suffers, he finally controls the plot. He can point the finger. He can summon the shadow, but he can also tell the truth. A truth no one else can access. So which is it? A dying confession? Or a final performance? His caretakers argued over whether he was vulnerable or manipulative, and that argument shaped how they guarded him. Who benefited most from treating him like a child instead of a suspect? Let's do the one thing most versions avoid. Put a clock on every step Kaspar took that day, and watch a suspect appear where you didn't expect one. Kaspar Hauser dies from the stabbing, not instantly, not in a clean cinematic way. He fades over days. He suffers. He is watched. The town waits. When he is gone, the silence is not relief. It is an opening, because now everyone can speak without being contradicted. He is buried. People attend. People tend. People judge. People claim they always knew. And the story begins to split in two. In one version, he is the tragic victim, the hidden heir, eliminated at last. In the other, he is the architect of his own downfall, a young man who injured himself and miscalculated. Both versions explain everything. That is why both survive. The evidence is not enough to kill either one. And so the death does not end the mystery, it seals it. Because the only person who might have fully known the truth is no longer alive to say it. So what exactly did Kaspar take to the grave? If this was an assassination, the killer wanted a myth, not just a death. So why leave him alive long enough to speak at all? After death comes sorting. Authorities gather papers. They compare accounts. They look again at the note. They look again at the route through the garden. They look again at Kaspar's past incidents. Because this is not the first time he has been hurt. There were earlier injuries, earlier scares, earlier moments when danger brushed close. Some saw patterns, others saw schemes. Each previous incident becomes a rehearsal, depending on who is speaking. If you believe in an assassin, the earlier injuries look like attempts. If you believe in self-harm, the earlier injuries look like practice. And if you believe in accident and confusion, they look like the mess of a troubled life. But official conclusions do not always settle public imagination. Sometimes they only fuel it, because a conclusion that feels uncertain is heard as a cover. And in politically sensitive stories, every uncertainty is treated like intent. So was the official story ever going to be accepted, no matter what it said? Then there is the larger claim, the one that made Kaspar famous before he ever spoke full sentences. That he was not an ordinary foundling. That he was born into a house with power. That his existence threatened someone. It is a claim with enormous gravitational pull. If it is true, the stabbing is not just violence. It is history correcting itself. If it is false, the claim is still powerful, because it explains why so many educated people suspended disbelief. They wanted a lost prince. They wanted a real-life moral fable. They wanted proof that evil can be hidden behind palace walls. Kaspar arrived at the right time for that hunger. And once that hunger exists, facts become negotiable. Every detail becomes a clue. Every missing detail becomes an even bigger clue. So we have to ask, did the legend of noble birth create the motive for murder? Or did the stabbing create the legend's permanence? Quick recap. Here's what we know so far, and the one detail that still doesn't fit. If this was self-inflicted, Kaspar chose a method that risked dying slowly in public. What kind of desperation makes someone gamble their life for belief? Here's the reset. Assume the note is authentic, and then explain why it reads like it was written to be uncheckable. We return to the garden, not as a place of romance, as a place of geometry, paths that cross, places that hide, places that do not, a meeting point chosen by someone, either by the attacker or by Kaspar. If the attacker is real, the attacker takes a risk, a public space, a short distance to help, a victim who can run. That risk makes sense only if the attacker believes he will not be seen, or believes he will not be pursued, or believes the wound will be fatal quickly. But it is not. Kaspar escapes. He speaks. He creates a trail. If the attacker is not real, then the garden is still a choice, because it provides plausible solitude, and it provides a stage for rescue. It is close enough to civilization for an audience, far enough for mystery, so the garden itself does not answer us. It only offers possibilities. What matters is the hand that chose it. So whose plan does that setting resemble more? One small physical detail about the injury refuses to sit still across accounts. Is that inconsistency the fingerprint of a cover-up, or the blur of a staged scene falling apart? Now we consider Kaspar's inner world, not as a diagnosis, as a human condition. Imagine growing up without normal touch, without normal conversation, without normal trust. Then imagine being thrown into fame, watched while you learn how to eat, praised when you do well, mocked when you fail, used as a symbol in arguments you did not start. It would twist anyone. It would make attention feel like oxygen. It would also make attention feel like threat. People around Kaspar often spoke about him, not to him. They debated his legitimacy as if he were absent, yet he was in the room, hearing it, feeling it. That kind of life can produce desperation. It can also produce calculation. Sometimes the two look identical, so if Kaspar harmed himself, was it fraud? Or was it a cry for control? And if someone else harmed him, how did they choose the moment when he was most isolated? Kaspar's story threatened reputations far above his station. If powerful people feared what he represented, why didn't they silence him sooner and quieter? Now flip it, assume Kaspar staged it, and then explain how he would risk a wound that could easily kill him before anyone arrived. Then we consider the people around him. Caretakers, officials, advocates, skeptics. Each person had something at stake. Reputation, authority, a theory, a book, a career. Even kindness can become possession, because when you rescue someone famous, the rescue becomes part of your identity. Kaspar's protectors could be protective. They could also be controlling. And Kaspar, wanting adulthood, could push back. That friction creates secrets. Small ones, large ones. The stabbing cuts through that network. It forces everyone to choose a position, to speak firmly, to accuse, to defend. And in that firm speaking, nuance dies. So in the days before the attack, who was frustrated enough to want the story to end? Quick recap. Here's what we know so far, and the one detail that still doesn't fit. If we follow the murder theory, we enter a world of shadows. A hidden birth. A substitution. A child removed. A dynasty protected. The stabbing becomes the final act in a long concealment. It is compelling because it explains the original mystery and the violent ending. One clean arc. But clean arcs are what humans prefer, not what history provides. Real conspiracies exist. So do imagined ones, The problem is that both can produce the same artifacts: silence, missing documentation, careful statements, people who suddenly forget. In Kaspar's case, the lack of early records is not unusual. Foundlings vanish into gaps all the time, yet this foundling did not vanish. He rose. He became famous. Which makes the absence feel intentional. And when something feels intentional, we look for an author. So if there was an author here, where are the fingerprints? Everyone asks who stabbed him, but fewer ask who first shaped the public version of the stabbing. Who controlled the first retelling? And what did they need the world to believe? If we follow the fraud theory, we enter a different discomfort. Because it asks us to believe a lonely young man would cut himself for attention. Not impossible, not even rare. But in this story, the stakes are high. The wound is serious. The outcome is death. Those who argue self-infliction must explain the fatal turn. Was it meant to be shallow? Did it go wrong? Did infection set in? Did panic keep him from seeking help sooner? Or was it never meant to be survivable? A planned exit, a last attempt to force belief through martyrdom. But martyrdom requires an audience that cares. And by 1833, some of that audience had turned, which might make desperation stronger, or might make the whole idea less effective. So if Kaspar did this to himself, what exactly was he trying to achieve in that moment? He claimed the attacker lured him with a promise, not a threat. What does that say about what Kaspar wanted at that moment? Money, answers, or a final role? Forget the attacker for 10 seconds and follow the adults around Kaspar. Because the loudest motive may belong to the people who claim to protect him. There is also a third possibility people hate, that there is no grand design, no royal assassin, no carefully crafted hoax, only a chaotic interaction, a conflict with someone ordinary, a quarrel, a robbery, a personal grievance, a predator who saw a vulnerable figure. Kaspar was recognizable. He was also isolated. That combination attracts trouble. In this reading, the stabbing is not the climax of a political thriller. It is the tragedy of notoriety. Fame without protection, a young man who cannot move through the world normally. But this theory fails in a different way. It does not satisfy the scale of the story. It makes the ending feel too small. And human beings resist small endings. We want meaning. We want narrative justice. So we're rejecting the ordinary explanation because it is wrong, or because it is unsatisfying. After Kaspar's death, the arguments continue like a machine that cannot be turned off. Pamphlets, letters, private conversations, public lectures. Each side recruits the same facts. And each side recruits the same facts. And each side treats the other as immoral. Believers call skeptics cruel. Skeptics call believers gullible. In the middle is a dead young man. And around him is a society practicing modern celebrity. Kaspar Hauser becomes content. A case. A spectacle. People claim to defend him, but they also consume him. They keep him alive by retelling him. And with every retelling, the story shifts. Details sharpen or blur depending on need. A phrase becomes famous. A note becomes a relic. A wound becomes a symbol. And the original person becomes harder to see. So when we ask who stabbed Kaspar, we also have to ask something else. Who benefited from not knowing? Quick recap. Here's what we know so far, and the one detail that still doesn't fit. The note points outward to an unknown stranger, yet the scene points inward to Kaspar's habits and fears. Which clue should we trust when they contradict each other? Because uncertainty has value. If the case stays open in the mind, it stays profitable. It stays politically useful. It stays emotionally useful. For some, Kaspar is proof that power hides crimes. For others, he is proof that the public can be manipulated. For others still, he is proof that trauma can deform a life. Each group points to him and says, "Look," and none of them can be fully disproven. The stabbing in 1833 becomes a hinge. Before it, there is hope of solving the mystery. After it, there is only interpretation. And interpretation is a battlefield. In that battlefield, even the garden becomes myth. Even the last words become scripture. Even the note becomes prophecy. But the knife, the blood, the panic, those were real. Whatever else is true, a human body was cut. So was that cut the work of a hidden hand? Or the final consequence of living as an unsolved riddle? Let's sit with the image again. Kaspar running, his hand pressed to his side, a life training, a voice trying to shape the story before it ends. It is easy to romanticize that moment, to turn it into destiny. But it is also intimate, a frightened person trying to reach another person. And that intimacy is what often gets lost. Kaspar Hauser was argued over like property. His identity was treated like territory. Yet on that day in 1833, he was simply alone in a garden, and then he was not. Someone closed the distance. Someone lifted a blade. Whether that someone was a stranger or himself, the moment is still a collision between isolation and attention. He gets attention at the worst possible time, and even in dying, he cannot step out of the story. He can only push it in a direction. So the last question is the one the case never escapes. Was Kaspar Hauser the child in the tower? Or was he the author of the tower he asked us to imagine?